So, Bob, uh, after talking nearly every week for 23 years, a chance to have a podcast together, a chance for 15, 20 minutes to share both of our excitement and especially your leadership and story about how right now in our world, the relationship matters most. And that byline you created of we can actually learn to change our mindset so that we're creating the way we relate. And that's the underpinning now of where we're going at the center with your support and leadership and coaching. Tell me something about just what some of your earliest recognition that people were talking relationships, but they weren't living it.
Well, both my experience in teaching and coaching evolved over the years with regard to what leadership really is. And leadership to me then became much more personalized. It was not a template that you can superimpose over somebody and allow them to develop behaviors that are leadership behaviors. It comes from inside. It's an internal adaptation to being a leader. So first, it's relational within yourself. And then secondly, it became apparent, particularly in coaching people, that it has to be very, very relational and focused with regard to each interaction that you have with somebody else as a leader. So over time, for me, in coaching others, what evolved was the sense that it was really important for many, many reasons, but and different reasons with different people to go inside and do the kind of inquiry that's necessary to see how you can best relate as a leader outside. And then very, very importantly as well, to do some planning, do some thinking, develop a strategy around every relationship that you're going to have. So it's strategic with regard to relationship, not outcome. So in working with people in the business community and others, they always had strategy in terms of outcome, but they never had strategy as it related to relationship. So what we did is reverse that dynamic as related to the coaching consideration, to the extent that they decided it was more important to have that relational impact, and from the relational impact came the outcome.
Now you and I've talked a lot and we're quite familiar with it, but I think it's quite significant, your last comment there, that people, especially since you've been coaching and working with people not just in the education field and administrating schools where we know you have to pay attention to relationships, but you've been working with people who run major companies and are looking at mostly often in their mindset at the bottom line and compliance, and it has a real impact. And yet you've been telling me that people have changed their mind about what matters. Can you give any kind of story or examples of what you just said, where people are now saying, well, the outcome's not the bottom line anymore?
Yeah, it has evolved in so many ways for each of the people that I've worked with. And it's been, and we've discussed it a great deal, the two of us, it's been very, very gratifying to see that what happens over time is that as you work with people around relationship, they develop an authenticity and congruence of their approach, which is relational, but is more truly them. And for people that I've worked with in the business arena, that has been extraordinarily impactful to them, because for the most part, be it sales or that sense of bringing your corporate profile forward or something else, they have an idea of the image that they want to portray, as opposed to simply being congruent and authentic inside of themselves and letting that shine outward. Once that's accomplished in the coaching context, things can really change. Some of the clients that I've worked with, for example, may have had an idea of who they were based upon what role they might have played. I, in fact, worked with one fellow who spent a number of years in the NFL, but was now in a different role in sales. And in that capacity, although it was interesting to clients that he'd spent time in the NFL, that's really not what he as a person had to offer. And so it was an adjustment for him to present himself more as a human being and less as the role of NFL player. And in fact, that's a metaphor in a lot of ways for other kinds of people's experience. Most of us carry into our work an idea of what we ought to be as a leader. So as soon as we're appointed a principal or a superintendent, or we're appointed to a particular job that's identified as leader, we have an image of what that ought to be. And oftentimes that tends to obscure who we can be.
And what draws, in the work you've seen, what's now drawing people to really want to look at who they are authentically, relationally, as you say, and not in terms of just the interactions and products and compliance they can get from people and defining their success that way? Okay. Why do they come to you lately?
Well, generally they come to me with the idea that I can fix something that's occurring organizationally or with them as a leader personally. On the other hand, as we do our work, what they find is that they are not enjoying the capacity of leader in the way that they might enjoy it. And so as we do our work, it's really quite rewarding to see that, wow, there's much more joy and happiness in reflecting your true leadership self in other than reflecting an image leader self. So the whole sense of relational learning has been for them a way of obtaining of well-being, not only for themselves, but within their organization and the context and the people that they work with, which is very rewarding for them.
Yeah. I remember one of our discussions, and you mentioned some of them had taken what we often do in any relationship is we go with the blame first. Well, people just aren't doing the work anymore, and they don't want to do this work, and they won't pay attention to me. And you've mentioned a number of those which, even if true, don't seem to lead to the kind of satisfaction and impact that we're now talking about with the model you've been so, as a co-organized for me and led me to understand that there is a way to improve your impact through your intention, and there's a way to improve your joy and satisfaction in your relationships at the same time. And that just opens up a whole new world to people of impact and satisfaction. And that's a core of what we are now wanting to help people with.
Well, exactly. And what really becomes a very clear dynamic for people is that their input ultimately is what their impact will be. And so the more they are their authentic selves, they're vulnerable, they're real, and they interact in relationship with people in that capacity, as opposed to one of attempting to achieve outcomes or that sort of thing, they find it's far more rewarding for them. At the same time, they're establishing a climate of change and co-creativity within the organization that is really something that they can be proud of. So it happens in individual interactions, every one of them, where you approach it with a mindset and focus on the relationship. to the extent that you're actually developing a greater capacity in those interactions to allow people to want to be co-creators with you, as opposed to your superimposing an outcome on them. And
no, go ahead. I remember our times together. We kind of get each other going all the time. That's why I'm hoping people will, if they could, even on a podcast, say, "Well, I'd like to make this point, and I see that true," and so on. But that last part you mentioned, for 20 years, our discovery together was that relationship ability to be a relational leader or to be learning relationally, our two core themes, that there actually is a developmental sequence that runs to this part you just mentioned. So you don't often just jump into co-creating with people and equal partnership that's authentic. It takes some development. You want to state quickly, because I think that's core and people can see that on the website or talk to you or I about that, understand that actually relational leadership develops through these four, in a sense, we say stages, and then gets to a co-creating environment that brings more satisfaction, joy to everyone.
that's the richness of it, because leaders are learners and learners are leaders.
There you go.
Together they co-create. And when you're operating, and that's the richness of our relationship and so many of the co-consulting experiences we've had, when you're co-creating, when people are really involved and drawn into that relational interaction, you can really affect change. Then you are indeed in co-creation, moving forward with a sense of participation, with a sense of affiliation, that really does make a difference. And the experience, the coaching one is so clear that as people are just simply taking the time to focus on the relationship in simple ways, that really validates the other person and themselves and values who they are and what they're about, things really begin to change. And the rich, wonderful part of it for us is we get to watch that occur as change occurs with people, and they give us the feedback of the changes that works within their organization or school or that, whatever. So that's the value of the work, when people begin to think relationship first, as opposed to outcome. And it's a significant change, and it takes time. But when that occurs, things happen.
Wow. And so many stories we could tell about that. And summarizing again on that with this short, powerful introduction, because we want to be talking pretty frequently with people as they learn how to move through recognition and the knowledge and the valuing and then this co-creating, is that this isn't something you do to people, right? So interestingly enough, even though you're changing your mindset, that changes the relationship you have right from the start, where you're not trying to fix people. It's not a transaction. It's not another fancy technique to let people know you care. That we could go into that quite a bit, but I know that's what you do, and we want to offer through you and others in coaching people to just understand the subtleties and little mind shift changes that will get them interacting, living with people relationally, and learning relationally.
Absolutely, 100%. I could not have said it better. That is truly how that change occurs. And it occurs in ways that people find to be extraordinarily rewarding.
Well, I want to thank you publicly. It's a podcast, but I wish we could get on stage face to face with people again after 30 years and hundreds of stories that our time together and what you've taught me, and we could share some of the never thought of that moments we've had, which has made our relationship so powerful. And your coaching of me and helping us build now this focus we have. I can't thank you enough, and thank you for this short podcast as we introduce ourselves to the world, and hope people will call us and chat with us. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. I'm always enjoy being with you in every circumstance. Thanks, George.
Now,